The rain had not stopped for 3 days in the quiet town of Black Hollow. Fog clung to the trees like pale fingers, and the old Victorian house at the end of Ashford Lane stood abandoned. At least, that's what everyone believed. People crossed the street to avoid it. They said lights flickered inside at night. They said a woman in white stood at the upstairs window. They said she wasn't alive. Daniel Mercer never believed in ghost stories. A former war photographer who'd seen too much of the world's darkness, he trusted only what he could capture through a lens. After returning from an overseas assignment, he moved to Black Hollow seeking silence. Instead, he found whispers, and every whisper circled back to that house. One evening, driven by boredom more than bravery, Daniel carried his camera down Ashford Lane. The fog was thick enough to swallow sound. The iron gate creaked as he pushed it open. The yard was overgrown, roses dead and thorns twisting like skeletal hands. The front door stood slightly ajar. Inside, the air smelled of dust and something faintly sweet, like old perfume. He lifted his camera. The staircase groaned under his steps. At the top of the stairs, at the end of the hallway, stood a woman. She wore a long ivory dress that flowed unnaturally still, untouched by the draft drifting through broken windows. Her skin was pale, almost luminous. Dark hair spilled over her shoulders. But it was her eyes that froze him, wide, empty, and filled with something like sorrow stretched across centuries. Daniel didn't lower the camera. "Hello?" he called, though his voice barely left his throat. The woman did not blink. He adjusted his focus. The lens sharpened her outline. Through the viewfinder, she looked less like a figure and more like an absence, a shape the world had forgotten to fill in. His pulse hammered. His instincts screamed to leave, but the photographer in him whispered louder. Click. The flash exploded down the hallway. For a split second, the light swallowed everything. And then she screamed. It wasn't a sound of rage. It was pain, raw, human, terrified. Daniel stumbled back. The hallway lights flickered violently. The air shifted. The temperature rose from icy to suffocating warmth. When his vision cleared, the woman was on the floor, crying, breathing. He lowered the camera slowly. Her skin, once pale as marble, flushed with color. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Tears streamed down her face. She curled into herself, whispering something over and over. "I'm here. I'm here. I'm here." Daniel approached cautiously. "You can hear me?" She looked up at him, confusion replacing the emptiness in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. Her voice trembled, fragile and alive. Where have you been?" I just got here. Who are you?" "My name is Eleanor Whittemore." The name rang faintly in his memory. Later he would discover why, but in that moment all he saw was a woman who, moments ago, had not seemed entirely real. "You were—" he hesitated. "You were standing. You didn't move. You didn't breathe." She touched her own face as if rediscovering it. "I couldn't. I haven't been able to for so long." The story unraveled in broken fragments. Decades ago, Eleanor had lived in the house with her husband. One winter night, there was a fire. Smoke filled the halls. She had been trapped upstairs. The townspeople claimed her body was never found. Some said she ran away. Others said she died in the flames. But Eleanor remembered something else. "I didn't die," she said, shivering. "I remember the smoke. I remember falling. And then nothing. I was standing here, watching time pass, seasons changing, people coming and going. No one could see me. No one could hear me. I tried to scream. I tried to move. I was here, but I wasn't." Daniel's heart pounded as he replayed the photo in his mind. "Until the flash," he murmured. She nodded slowly. "It felt like lightning struck through me, like something pulled me back." A theory formed in his mind, wild and impossible. During the war, Daniel had once photographed a man moments before he died. The image had captured something beyond flesh. He never understood it, but he had felt it. A camera did more than freeze time. Sometimes it disturbed it. Maybe Eleanor had not been dead. Maybe she had been caught between moments, trapped in some fracture of reality, unseen, untouched, unheard, and the burst of light had snapped her back into the present. "You were like a photograph," he said softly, "stuck." Eleanor stared at her trembling hands. "Am I real now?" He hesitated only a second before reaching forward and taking her hand. It was warm. "Yes," he said. Downstairs, a clock that had long been silent began to tick. The fog outside the windows thinned, as if the world itself exhaled. But the house groaned again, this time not in decay but in release. The walls seemed lighter, the air clearer. Years of stillness dissolved in a single breath. Daniel helped Eleanor to her feet. She swayed but remained solid, alive. "I've been alone for so long," she whispered. "You're not anymore." By morning, the story would change. The townspeople would see lights in the house and assume renovation had begun. They would not know that something far stranger had happened, that a woman lost between life and death had stepped back into time. Daniel never published the photograph. When he looked at it later, it showed no empty hallway flooded with light. No woman, no ghost, just dust dancing in a beam of flash. But he knew what he had seen. Sometimes he would wake in the night and find Eleanor standing by the window, staring at the sunrise like it was the first one she had ever witnessed. Because, in a way, it was. She had been a ghost until that shot, and all it took to bring her back was a single flash of light, daring to interrupt eternity.